I guess I have two questions. One is, what can be done to mitigate the horrors that we're seeing now, if anything, from the perspective of a political movement, in your opinion? And two, we're seeing, a nascent Palestinian autonomy movement outside of Palestine in a way that I don't feel like I've seen in my lifetime, where there is a more concerted effort and what appears to be, much of it may be lip service, but appears to be a greater understanding that there needs to be Palestinian autonomy. Do you perceive, from a historical perspective, that assuming we do see these changes that you're talking about, that it will result? What kind of, are we talking a two-state solution or a one-state solution? Do you perceive is more likely, with an understanding of the constraints that are involved here?
Yeah, well, to your first point, I think that there are two clocks working here. One is a clock that works on a slower pace. And this is the change in public opinion in the world about Palestine, but not only in public opinion, also in the international legal tribunals. We've seen it in the rulings of the ICJ and the ICC, the language used by the United Nations. So we already have some new allies that change the language about Palestine and are calling for a strong pressure on Israel to stop its genocidal policies in Gaza and the other brutal policies it enacts elsewhere. But there is a quicker pace, and this is the pace on the events on the ground, motivated by this neo-Zionist messianic government, even more than by Netanyahu himself. He's just the captive of this neo-Zionist messianism, that they believe they have an historical moment. In fact, they think it's a narrow historical window. That's why they are pushing for a regional war of everyone against everyone, a bit like these Christian Zionists we talked about before. They really believe that that's a rare historical moment to create what they would call a new Middle East, namely one in which greater Israel is reestablished with very few Palestinians in it, and everyone else is deterred by that, by that Israel to the extent that it would seek alliances with it rather than challenge its domination. That's the way they think, and they are in powerful positions, not just in the government, but also in the army, in the security service, and so on. So,
and I would argue in our folks like Brett McGurk and much of the neocons, very similar language in creating a new Middle East.
Absolutely, they have counterparts elsewhere, but they are quickening the pace of destruction. So we need to find a way of narrowing the gap between these two paces, and that it connects to your second question. I think a very crucial role is not for the students in the campuses, which they should continue, and they play a fantastic role. But the crucial role, you're absolutely right, it's for the Palestinian national movement. And nobody has the right really to criticize them that deeply, because what they are going through is so severe that it's not that surprising that you don't have a very well organized, unified, representative body that you could call the New Palestine Liberation Organization. But I think you're right. The younger generation of the Palestinians are working on it more intensively than ever before. We don't see the results as yet because it's a very changing project to recreate the national movement, giving the fragmentation, the disunity, and the problems everybody is familiar with within the Palestinian political system. To my mind, two things have to happen for the Palestinians to become the leading actor in changing the reality, both on the ground and in narrowing the gap I was talking about. One is for the Palestinians and Israel to change their strategy. I mean, that particular group that nobody talks about of 2 million Palestinians still believes it can play in two political fields, the Israeli political field and the Palestinian political field. They are not at all a factor in Israeli politics anymore. Maybe there never was, but they're definitely not now. And I think they should play a far more major role in Palestinian politics. I also have an egotistic wish for that, because these are the only Palestinians who know that not all the Israeli Jews are settlers or soldiers. They have intimate relationship with the Israelis, and they know that there are some good human beings there as well, and that always helps for a less violent decolonization. The second thing that has to happen, because it's a young movement of changing, they have something which is very healthy among young revolutionary movements in this century, a total disdain towards organization, unions, parties, and so on. But you cannot move forward without organization, without a party, without a union. And they will have to overcome their very natural and understandable rejection of organization, because there's hierarchy, there's a potential for corruption there. They will have to overcome that. They will need either to change the PLO from within or build a new organization. And they're trying to do it, but I think they have to triple their efforts and to be a bit more pragmatic and political about it. And that comes to your last point. I know it doesn't matter what I want. I think the vast majority of them can only think about a one-state solution. The chant that the American Congress decided is anti-Semitic, Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, is not an anti-Semitic chant. It's the declaration of the wish to have a democratic state between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, one that would resemble the way Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived in Palestine before 1948. And I think that's a very credible slogan that actually democracies, especially in the world, should have adopted, rather than pursuing legislations that forbid such chants or slogans and defaming them as anti-Semitic or racist. But I think for that slogan to become a political program, it needs to be adopted by a new organization, either a renewed organization of liberation or a new organization of liberation.
And framing it in the U.S. context, I think we're seeing some liberal writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates speak about it in terms of racial segregation and Jim Crow, which I think is helpful in getting certain liberals in this country on board with one state for all people from the river to the sea. But I guess my final question for you, Professor Pappé, is about Israeli society. The figures about how many dual citizens have fled Israel seem to be a bit unreliable, but it's reflected in the fact that the economy is doing very poorly. Moody's has downgraded them once again. Both people have fled, and also there are many young people who are in the army, and that's affecting the economy as well. But that contraction doesn't seem to be doing anything to pressure the government. Netanyahu has solidified his position in recent weeks, as we've discussed. How can Israeli society change? Because it just seems to be getting more and more radicalized as the violence continues. And even in the hostage protests, I don't see much discussion at all about Palestinians and their rights.
Well, it's a very indoctrinated society. And the Israelis you see today, the vast majority of them are graduates of a certain educational system that is supported by a certain cultural system, language that is used by politicians, the media, the academia, and so on. And therefore, there's very little hope for change. The next generation of graduates from the Israeli school system would adopt similar points of view. And that point of view is that it doesn't matter whether you have a corrupt prime minister or if the army failed on the 7th of October. There are no other options. The only horizon is another 50, 60 years of wars that you always have to win them. There is no option of success. Of course, you have these, as I described before, the new messianic ones who believe that if you use correctly this particular time in history, you can inflict such a defeat on the Arab world that you will have more peaceful years coming. But the vast majority of Israeli Jews do not believe in it. They believe that they are doomed to live the way they lived in the last year, which is incredible, pathological. And it's all over the place. Not surprisingly, if you don't feel like I do, that there is a credible alternative to that reality, and there's another way of living, you leave. What else can you do? And those who don't leave either cannot do it, because it's not that easy to leave, or they somehow believe that there's no other options there are no other alternative ways of living anywhere. This is the way, this is the way you have to live. And probably they become a bit more religious and I don't know, maybe imagine a better life in the afterlife, or believe that God somehow would solve the economic problem, even if the Minister of Finance cannot do that. Yes, it's a society in trauma. Is a society that is led by people with no horizon for any different kind of future, and there are no alternative political forces that offer a different horizon. So, what you see now, you will get next year and the year after, and it doesn't matter whether Netanyahu would be elected or not elected in 2026. As you rightly say, he seems to be like the phoenix. Everybody buried him politically, but there he is now again, the most popular politician in Israel, and he might remain like this in 2026. The more right-wing the Israeli political system will be or remain or become, the quicker the collapse of Israel will happen. And because I don't see any alternative to that kind of politics in Israel, I stand by my analysis that we are seeing the beginning of the collapse here, which, as I say, can be a horrific scenario. I'm an Israeli Jew myself. I don't want destruction, neither to me, to my family, and to the people I love and care. But it could also be a moment of hope for building a free Palestine for all, from the river to the sea. The Palestinians definitely deserve to live in such a state which is free from oppression, colonization, apartheid. I also believe Zionism is very bad for the Jews wherever they are, and also for the Jews in Israel. A de-Zionized, decolonized, post-Israel Palestine would be a win-win, to my mind, to everyone. You just have to find a way of getting there quickly and with as less violent as possible, and believe that it's possible. Because otherwise, because it's such a challenging imagination, you need such an imagination and the kind of optimistic overdoses as I have to believe that this is possible, which hopefully will activate the right actions towards such a goal.
Ilan Pappe, professor of history at the University of Exeter and director of European Center for Palestine Studies. Most recently, lobbying for Zionism on both sides of the Atlantic. In fact, I'm not even sure that's the most recent book of yours.
That's true.
But certainly fascinating read. Professor, thank you again. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you both. Thank you, Emma and Sam. Thank you.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.